Without further ado, te whānau, we're going to jump straight into our first keynote of the day. Papa Mark and Whaia Dr. Toi Kōpua. Te tokorua nei he hara mai. Reinstating and embedding Indigenous knowledge systems. Te whare wānanga o Te Kurahuna is the kaitaki of Mahi Atua. Mahi Atua is an invitation and opportunity to remember that living on a frequency in tune with our atuatanga can empower you and those around you. It is a lens through which to view and experience the world from te taiao Māori, o tira, ko ahau, ko koe ko. In viewing the world this way, guided by mātauranga Māori and principles passed down through karakia, pūrākau, and toi, we can consider te ao hurihuri with an intrinsic light, one that cannot be tainted or colonized. Principles and values within mātauranga Māori form an extensive framework and foundation, which is reflected in the values and attributes practiced by those engaged in Mahi Atua. Mahi Atua provides a direct link through whakapapa and pūrākau to the characteristics of our atua and tupuna. Ultimately, this connects us to our pre-colonized, pre-treaty, pre-suppressed sovereign selves. Mahi Atua is a framework that confronts, addresses and aims to indigenize spaces, both physical and mental, that have historically been designed and delivered by a colonized worldview, where the perspectives and needs of Indigenous knowledge and people have not been seen or valued. Mahi Atua has been referred to as a worldview, a Māori paradigm, and an ontological transformation. As a collective, those who engage in collective conversations using Mahi Atua principles are reclaiming and indigenizing a unique way of studying wisdom. Māori creation and custom stories are the foundation from which we question, discuss, and debate ideas about existence, knowledge, values, mind, and language. Mahi Atua promotes the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples to indigenize all the spaces we occupy. Nā reira, e te tokorua, nau mai anō ki te poho tō tātou whare kōrero e mihi kaua ki ana, and I'm so pumped to hear all of the kōrero that you have. Nā reira, tēnei te rākau karawhiu nei ki a korua, tēnā kōrua.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, tēnā yata. Well, as you can see, it's just me. There was a fog over the Gisborne airport, which meant that Mark is in transit and he is trying to get on board. But Crystal, if you are calling him and you are calling me as well, so just getting some things clear. If you want to call him 021 295 2812 and don't call the messenger or you'll get me and it'll interrupt this. So that's just getting that straight. Hopefully he'll join us. He's in Paremata at the moment, on the way to Papaioia to pick up our baby at Manukura, the 23rd top academic school in Aotearoa that prioritises mātauranga Māori and sports. So tēnā koutou, he uri tēnei no te tairāwhiti. I really loved the preamble you gave, Kawiti. It was like enough time for me to try and turn my notifications off, and it doesn't sound like that worked. But kei te pai. Ko hikurangi tōku maunga, ko waiapu tōku awa, ko Ngāti Porou tōku iwi. Ahakoa no te tairāwhiti I tipu ake au I porirua, I raro I te maru o Ngāti Toa, nei ranga mihi rawa atu ki a rātou, nā rātou tōku whānau I poipoi. Kei te noho māua ko Mark ki te tūranga nui ākiwa. And it's really lovely to be here. I feel really excited, and I know my husband will join me, but it's almost like he tests me like this all the time. So he will come, I trust that, and if he doesn't, I have a plan B. Mate te kāinga tahi ora te kāinga rua. And first of all, thank you for having us, and for us to be able to share our kaupapa with you all. I know that you have a very similar kaupapa to us, focusing on tinana and whenua. And when I think about the specialty that I'm in mental health, I'm intrigued by the idea that mental health sits inside a health system. Maybe we need, first wero is maybe we need to take the word health out of mental and it won't be funded inside the health system. Koera tētahi whakaaro. I am aware of Toi Tangata by a friend, Leonie Mātoi, who inspired me to think differently when I first met her, and she talked about the spaces she occupied, and also with one of your keynotes tomorrow, Dr. Ihi Heke. I'm absolutely inspired by the work he does and very aware that we're very human-centric, and I guess Mahi Atua allows us to consider as humans how human-centric we are, and how our lives could be different if we conceptualize differently, if we reframe the things that we're thinking, which often involves shedding a skin, our colonized skin, which can be quite exposing, and regrowing skin, which is a process, right? So we had 4 things that we wanted to talk to you about, and but we don't have enough time. So the first thing was to introduce you to Te Kurahuna. Mark and I are the directors of Te Kurahuna. It's a whare wānanga, a small whare wānanga, where we have a small panel. There you are. Take a pai koe?
Ai, kei te pai, tino pai.
Who helped you? Was it Crystal?
No, I tuku kōrero au ki te, because I kuhu au hei whatu mātakitaki noheo, and e hala I te panelists. So nāne ko panelist kewa.
Okay, ka pai. Well, whakamaramatu ki te ao ko wai koe no hea koe, and katahi ka whai tāua I tērā wātaka I kōrero tia I ngā pō.
Well, kia ora tātou, ko, you know, ko tata kia o te ki, ko Derek Lardeli hoki tēnei, but no. Ko mā Kōpua tēnei, no te aitanga hauite no Ngāti Ira no Ngāti Porou. I tupu anō au I reira I ngā hapu kato o Uawa, I moea a dai, o maua ko dai, I moe, he māua tamariki, me te mea nei he kaupapa, whakahirehire tō maua kaupapa, koera te tikanga, ka māro tonu, ka kaki, māro hoki maua, ki roto I tēnei kaupapa hei whai oranga mō te iwi. Kia ora tātou.
Hapai. I was just letting them know that there's 4 kaupapa that we could talk about all day, but we were just going to briefly mention the 4, starting with Te Kurahuna and talking about it as a whare wānanga. So you're here, so you can take that away. I'll give you about 30 seconds.
All right then. So Te Kurahuna means, well, mō ngā mea kāre māramuri tērā, it means the hidden gems. So ka kini, the X factor. And we decided to go with that name because that was something that we wanted to find in each individual and find within our culture, that X factor that motivates us, the X factor that drives us, the X factor that pulls us in, that magnetizes us, that particular factor that we can't name that is within each one of us. And so we decided to have these wānanga that would tap into our indigeneity, that would tap into our culture, and look at mātauranga Māori as a really, really valid guideline to how we will live our life, and also how we operate on a normal day-to-day business and tasks that we do. And so we started off very small, then we shifted into quite large. And most of us had employment. It became part of a huge, well, not a huge, but a movement that that now looks at system change. I mean, at the pinnacle of the work that we do, we look at system change, so that we can indigenize our space. It has 3 principles: indigenize our space, be an active learner, and embrace negative feedback, to be forever critical and analytic about your own practice, not anybody else's. Your own is the one that's key. And so those are our principles. They're simple as, they're motivating, they're actually achievable. And so Yeah, that's Kurohuna. We our main focus and is Mahi Atua, and Mahi Atua has got like a trademark, which is looking at pūrākau Atua, but also just mātauranga Māori. In a rounding that off, it's basically about mātauranga Māori as a ideology that we should live by.
And we have a report that we've just released, and recently you can go to www.mahiatua.com, and the report really tells us about our beginnings, where we were, what we've done, what we're doing now, and that includes the work we're doing in Hauraki within iwi hauora organisation Te Korowai Hauora o Hauraki. It talks a little bit about Te Kuwatuata in Gisborne that we developed, and Te Hiringa Matua. And what it doesn't talk about is the work that we're doing now. And if you've been following our page, you'll see that we're venturing into a partnership with the National Hauora Coalition to roll out kaupapa Māori services for mātauranga who are specialists in Mahi Atua to thrive when working with whānau in distress. And again, you'll notice I'm trying to avoid the language of a mental health service. To decolonize or to re-indigenize means we grow what we speak, and we don't really want to speak that language. So that's the other thing we do. We also have training, our rangi parauri training. And rangi parauri was Rangi Nui's grandfather. And is that right? Rangi Nui?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And so we're very aware of the names that we call everything, and our rangi parauri training is a hybrid training, so it's online learning as well as Zoom supervision following a 5-day intensive wānanga. We're looking to change that up. It's been hugely successful for about 99% of the people that attend, and we offer that as a way to inspire ourselves to forge ahead in the respective spaces that we occupy. But today, we wanted to talk to you, and the fourth kaupapa is about our book. We're
so close.
We're so close. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so today we decided that we would read and share and sort of mix up how we've written it in the book, but that we would give you a snippet into a chapter. And the chapter is in regards to uru and the power of grief and healing. And we wanted to give this to you so that you could see how you can utilize, operationalize, actualize, live with, bring alive our oranga whakapapa through your own stories. So without further ado, Mark is going to talk to you about we're going to prepare ourselves. We're going to learn a little bit more about Hine Kōrero, the whakapapa of Hine Kōrero, and why she's so important when it comes to the practical application and operationalizing of Mahi Atua. And that's because of the power of reflection. And then we'll give you some practical examples of how we use Hine Kōrero here with Mahi Atua. And then we're going to talk to, Mark is going to share the Pura Whetū story of uru, and then we'll give you a Hine Kōrero here, a reflection of uru, and then give you an example of one of our mātauranga actually who engaged in a wānanga with some distress that she had and what evolved from that. We'll hopefully guide you so that you can join us, and we won't have time to hear your reflections and your stories, but they really matter. So we'll give you some questions and hopefully spark the Hinātore in you to prepare you when you're listening to the story as well. Ka pai? So we're going to start with the Hine Kōrero here, Mr. Kōpua. Right.
So as you come down through the, down through the realms, you start at Tiki Tiki Orangi, and down you come, you end up at one of the rangi called rangi Matawai. Matawai means the eye, watery eyes. Now, one of the children of rangi Matawai was called Te Rito o Te Rangi. Now, Te Rito o Te Rangi had a son called Manono. And Manono had a son called Pūhaurangi. And Pūhaurangi had a son called Ohomairangi. and all Mairangi had a daughter. Well, we will say a daughter called Hīnātore. Now, what happens with Hīnātore, because the biggest thing that Hīnātore provided was the waters that were used for the toi ceremony in Tāne's ascent through the realms to obtain the baskets of knowledge. And what it is said, I roto i ngā kōrero, is that the waters that that Hīnātore had possession of were from all the tiers of all the apakura and all the mare kura from all of the heavens. And so it made this water that she possessed rather sacred. And it was the only water that you could use to go from one sacred realm and be elevated into another sacred realm. You couldn't use nor water. So they employed her services to provide that water, and it's referred to in our oriori as te wai whakata nā Hīnātore. So this is the whakapapa of Hīnātore, and we utilize that kōrero for Hīnātore as an atua of reflection, so that we can reflect upon our own doings and those of others that we're around. So that's koina te whakapapa o Hīnātore. Tāpiri atu ki tēnā, ko awa nui arangi te tahi atu o ngā siblings o Hīnātore. Ngā te awa tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, and for those who, if you know your pūrākau from your rohe, that's awesome. So we are sharing ours from ours, and Mark talked about tiki tiki orangi, like everyone knows what it means. So just in case you don't, what does it mean, Mr. Kōpua?
Oh, tiki tiki orangi means the uppermost of all the realms.
According to your version of the pūrākau, right?
According to my version, you could see it as the uppermost, or you could see it as the innermost, or you could see it as the furthest out.
Yeah, nice. And so Hīnātore here, in terms of using her power in Mahi Atua, we use it to reflect on our pūrākau and the meanings within our lives. And it's very much a healing process within wānanga, and how we use her will vary from providing questions to reflect on, and analysis, and personal and professional reflections. Now, we really do want to emphasize that inside a Western training institution to become a health practitioner, many people will talk about the need to keep your personal and professional body or way of being separate. And in Mahi Atua, we try and avoid that. We try and acknowledge that we have lots of different ways of being, but they are all of us, rather than divisive and siloing out your different momo, your different weke. So central to Mahi Atua is wānanga. And through the wānanga, we reflect using Hīnātore here. And when in wānanga, we would retell the pūrākau, like we're going to now, of uru, and we would sing about it, we write about it, talk about it, reenact parts of it, draw it, paint it, read it, haka it, karanga it, whai kōrero it, feel it, debate it, be in it, and do it. Hīnātore is magical in our wānanga. Everybody gets to wonder about what was spoken. It's like the Hinātore, this little speck of light. That potential is lurking somewhere, and something someone says brings it to light. No one really knows what will be the best approach, but everyone can see when there's a penny dropping moment. It's pretty cool. This is when someone shifts how they were viewing the problem during Hīnātore here. You can see their eyes ignited, and ka mai ngā whatu, whānau are engaged, and there is no right way. And if you shared your perspective and it didn't resonate with the whānau listening, then kei te pai. That's the beauty of wānanga, because that wānanga almost implies that there are many different perspectives, and not every single one will resonate with us. All it means is that we haven't yet found the Hinātore for those people who have come to you with the problem. The excitement of working together to find it is found in the hine kōrero time. And we would sometimes ask questions to assist in this process, which is what I'm going to get to do with you. The following is how we might begin hine kōrero here in our wānanga. So before Mark tells the story, I want you guys to just think about these questions. First though, do what you need to do to settle your mind, settle your heart, and your spirit to attend to these questions. Listen to the immediate answers. Don't judge or criticize yourself. Be curious to your own experience. Be open. Allow what comes first. The time to reflect on all of what we're going to wānanga about comes later. First of all, you have to pay attention to your initial response. How you respond, what you experience is unique to you and it matters. And so it's really important not to judge or criticize that. The time to reflect on that, as I said, comes later. You can choose to wānanga these questions with yourself, or you could do it with others. Kai a koe te tikanga. So here we go. What parts of the pūrākau that you're about to hear resonate with you and why? Who in this pūrākau do you identify with and why? Is there anyone or any circumstance in this pūrākau you feel mad at, angry at? Why? If you were to pick an atua to be in this pūrākau, who would you be and why? And have there been times in your own life where you've wanted to isolate, to hide away? What was happening? Okay, buckle in. Oh no, you already buckled in. Tell the story, Mr. Kōpua. Oh, okay, no, you're on mute. That's very amateur of you.
Kia ora. I am buckled in. Right, so Ranginui and Papatūānuku, when they got together, it was during a period that we refer to as te pō, and I'm going to use the words te pō, and then I'll add to that, to those words, that denote a period of time. So during te pō, ka moe a rangi rāua kōpapa kia rāua. And it must have been such a great moe, because born from that came this individual that we're going to talk about called Uru Te Ngangana. And when Uru Te Ngangana came into this world, te pō became te pō nui. Now, for those of us that know how to translate the word pō, I'll leave that up to you to translate it however you like, because it can be multi-translative. It's the past, the dark, the sadness, or the of state of being. Now, the next pregnancy that occurred brought about a set of twins, Roiho and Roake. And of course, like when the pō changed for Uru, this pō changed as well from te pō nui to te pō roa. And then again, another set of twins came about, and te pō nui and te pō roa became te pō kerekere. And that set of twins, the second set of twins, was Haipuru and Haimatua. Then born into the situation was our good old friend, Whiro Te Tipua. And when Whiro Te Tipua came about, te pō kerekere rolled into what we refer to as te pō uriuri. And te pō uriuri, in this pūrākau, is translated to mean the intense darkness. Because for those who are familiar with the traits of whiro, whiro brings about a huge level of intensity. And straight away, when whiro came in on the scene, whiro decided that whiro will take control of the situation. So whiro turned to the tuakama, there's five of them, and said, from this point on, I shall take control. I shall have be the single voice, and you fellows don't need to just follow. just follow me. And of course, that pedaled back Uru, because Uru knew that Uru was the mātauranga. And it pedaled back the twins as well. They weren't too sure about who did they follow, the mātauranga or their taina. They weren't sure. There was a lot of confusion. And of course, hence the pō within which Whiro was born was called Te Pūrākau. It was an intense time. And by the time the next child was born, called Tāwhiri Mātea, who brought in another level of intensity, it was called, the period of time shifted from Te Pōrākau to Te Tangata. Now, part of the reason why this shifted into Te Tangata was because Uru did not have a response to this intensity or to the beckoning of Uru's taina, the two sets of twins, and was so upset and so overwhelmed by this intensity that Uru had decided by then to no longer be a part of the whānau. And so Uru severed Uru's own umbilical cord or connection to this whānau. And at the time that Uru's taina called Tāwhiri Mātea was born, Uru then decided to leave the situation. And so Te Pō Uri with Whiro became Te Pō Tangotango, which is to remove yourself, the night from which the removal happened. Now we have to go back, and I just wanted to have some check in with everybody about the translation of the word pōuri, because a lot of you will understand that pōuri is the word that's in there, pōuri, which means sadness. And so te pōuri means intense sadness. Right. So right now this whānau continues to grow until they get to the situation where they have outsized their space where they exist between rangi and papa. They have thinking about, repurposing, and they've outsized it, and so they need to change the situation. And of course, Tane comes along, and Tane says, "Oh, if we can flood the space with light," and then the separation happens. And instead of flooding the place with light when the separation happened, they flooded this place there where they existed with water, and an immense amount of water. And born from out of that water was a being called Heketanga Wainui, which basically just means a lot of water that fell down. And so this water, they were flooded, not in light, in water. And of course, you get the two houses of thought that bicker and debate with one another. And of course, everybody's trying in that little situation, trying to figure out how on earth are we going to better our circumstances, because there's no light. It's still dark. There's a lot of water. Let's fix the water first, and then we'll go towards how to fix the darkness. Well, they came up with nothing. Nothing came up for them. And then Tane had a thought. I have a tuakana, and that tuakana's voice is not in this kōrero. And we don't know where that tuakana is, but I think that tuakana needs to have the voice of advice and counsel in this discussion. So Tane set off to try and find where the mātauranga Uru was. Called and called. Tane looked around and called out left, right, and center. And it just so happened that when Uru departed, Uru decided to hide underneath this huge cloak of their father, Rangi Nui. The name of the cloak is quite simple, quite self-explanatory, Te Kahu Tua Nui Arangi. So Uru hid under there, never to be seen, never to be found. So Uru thought. Uru could hear Tane calling and calling and calling. And Uru tried to be quiet, tried to be silent, tried to be still. But the calling just went on and on and on, and it was driving Uru crazy. And in the end, Uru couldn't contain the combustion and yelled out, "Oh, bugger off." Tane then knew, "I know where you are." And as Tane lifted the edge of the cloak up and went in underneath Te Kautua Nui Arangi, Tane noticed this glow in all this darkness, a healthy, rich glow, and knew that was the mātauranga uru te ngangana. So as Tane approached, Tane thought, wow, this glow, this light might be the thing that we're after. So Tane approached the mātauranga, and Uru kept saying, "No, I don't want nothing to do with you fellas. You can bugger off. I don't care about your fellas flooding. I don't care about your fellas darkness. You fellas, get out of here. I want nothing to do with you." But Tane persisted. If there was one thing about Tane, it was Tane's diligence to keep and commitment to a kaupapa. And so Tane, bit of whakawara here, because Tane then goes, "Oh, what are these things here?" As Tane looked down, and at the feet of Uru were these 4 baskets. And out of these 4 baskets were these chirping and glowing little lights. And it did distract Uru from being single focused and telling Tane to bugger off. And Uru said, "These, my taina, these are the children and the tears of a forgotten tuakana." And Tane looked at them, and Tane observed and heard these little chirping lights dancing around, calling out to their dad. And they were actually the tears. They were actually, well, not actually, they were the tears of Uru te ngangana. And they had crystallized, and Uru te ngangana had put them into these 4 baskets and packed them in there. And the 4 baskets were, one was called Raururangi. And those artists amongst you that know that the word raudu means to spiral, and those of you that also know that the word rangi is another word for mind, like pōrangi, haurangi, wairangi. And so raururangi means a spiraling mind. And if you can imagine the situation, that overwhelming situation that Uru was in, that the spiraling mind would have played havoc. And so he named this basket Raururangi, and the next basket was called Tangotango, which is named after the simple fact that Uru was so overwhelmed with their situation that Uru decided to remove himself. The next basket was called Rauaroha, and it was a basket that was full of all the tears that symbolized the love that Uru had given up. And the last one was called Te Kurahuna. And so these 4 baskets were full of all these little twinkling lights and so forth. And Tane thought, I knew it. I knew it if I came to the mātauranga, to our tuakana, there would be an answer in there somewhere. And so Uru, being aware of the situation that Tane and them were in, was quite responsive when Tane acknowledged their situation and asked if Uru could give Tane the baskets to enable Tane and the other Atua to bedeck their father with these lights to provide light. And Uru had said, "No, I can give you 2. I'll give you Tongotongo and I'll give you Raururangi. And so you take those now. You cannot have the others. Whatever you do, if you come back here looking for me again, I won't be here. I'll be gone." And so Tane was so pleased. He grabbed the hold of Raururangi, grabbed the hold of Tongotongo, and then went to a place called Maunga Nui o Tawa. And on Maunga Nui o Tawa, Tane stood on a plateau and on a taumata, and that taumata is called Te Urunga o Uru. Tane named that plateau after the mātauranga Uru. And from there, Tane took out the tiniest little dusty light and sprinkled them across the sky and thought, yeah, there you go. But it just still wasn't quite enough. So those are all the little asteroids and meteorites and those tiny little objects that fly about, and celestial objects. So Taine dug into Tangata and took out the bigger stars like Atutahi, Mere Mere Tuahi, Ototoru, all those little stars, Tawera, and heaved them up onto the sky and thought, oh yes, I'm about to do a haka celebration, but no, still not enough. So then Taine dug into Raururangi, and Taine pulled out quite a sizable globe out of Raururangi and decided, rather than just scattering them, I'll place this deliberately. And so Taine reached up with this globe and placed it on the puku, te pito o Ranginui. And that puku, that globe that he placed in the pito o Ranginui was called Hinātore. And yes, he thought, oh, now's the time for a haka celebration. But no, Hinātore was not quite enough light. So Taine looked into Raururangi again, reached in there and pulled out. And as soon as he pulled this huge globe out of that basket, the whole universe lit up. And Taine, being deliberate, placed that, it was Tamanui Te Rā. So Taine placed Tamanui Te Rā on the poho, te poho Ranginui. And by crikeys, Taine could then, once he had finished doing that, he could do a haka of celebration. During the haka of celebration and acknowledgement for uru and so forth, Taine grabbed a hold of one basket and heaved it up into the sky, and it became one of the galaxies called Tangotango. And he grabbed the other basket and heaved that up into the sky, and it's that circular galaxy that you see called Raururangi. And so all of a sudden, when Taine had pulled out Tamanui Te Rā and placed Tamanui Te Rā on the poho o Ranginui, they were then flooded with light. Te oro tātou.
When we think about that story, it's a lot of new information, right? And what we like to do is break it down again. And so Kitty, I'm really glad that you asked about the recordings and how soon you can get them so that you can reflect. But we'd like for you to now just reflect on you. Like, was there this almost like valuing of the pūrākau, but doubting that you can retain it all? And what does that doubt do for you as a learner? For years, we've been thinking about education in a very colonized way. And if you're not aware of the banking system, it becomes, it shows itself in the ways that we are sitting together like here, and how we absorb information, or when we don't, what it does for us. The banking system of learning implies that if I could just have everything that Mark told me injected into me, and I know it forever, that I will be okay, I'll be successful. But actually, according to our way of learning, that journey, which is another story, Taine and the 3 baskets of knowledge, is just as much an internal journey and learning experience to attain knowledge, which involves you. So as you hear the story, if you've just heard the story for the first time, there will be some of you who grabbed it and all of it. And there will be others, there's this kiridu that just keep flying, 2 of them flying in front of me, they're distracting me, like that. A lot of people say that that's ADHD, right? But that's only if your culture values focus. And as a peoples, we've been forced to sit in a classroom as children and not engage in arts. And so the idea is that we need to focus. And if we can't focus, then it will get in the way of us attaining this ideal life. But actually, it's not an ideal education system. So what we ask for you to do, if you didn't grab the questions before, thank you for bringing them up on the chat. But I'm also really interested in what's happening to you. And thank you. Someone else was, it's really cool. You get goosebumps but what else happens to you? Does it trigger I need more resources to consume my space so that I can really grab these pūrākau that matter to me? Really scan your body, check in if you're anxious, check in if you're turned off. All of that matters. And so if what we're going to do now is break the story down, because it's all about layering. And I can tell you now, there are stories that I've heard over the last decade, and I am still struggling with the names. And I was just talking to Mark last night as we were going through the Tāne Te Wānanga chapter, and I realized how much rongo has to do with that story. And I thought there was no space in my learning to even contemplate another aspect of the story, but now there is. And so allowing that process is really important. But let's go back. Enough. I digress. I waffle. So first of all, Mark, you talked about the different pō and how the tuakana were born in that different phase, right? That's really important, because we were born in a phase where our parents were quite colonized, trying to be as white as possible. And if you didn't have one of those, good on you. I had a Māori dad that really tried to make it in a white world by being white, but still loved to go back to tiki and engage in his upbringing, his memories, and reconnect with those people who mattered to him. So context matters. Uru was born in that context, and the world or the universe or the time that Uru existed in was familiar to Uru until a set of twins came along, right?
Yes.
So those, and so that carried on with another set of twins. So the first set of twins, ro iho, ro ake, which, by the way, they gifted Hīnātore, right? They gifted them the brain.
The brain.
Yeah. And then the next set of twins was Haipuru and Haimatua, who gifted Hīnātore the skull. And can you imagine that then this fifth Atua comes along, Whiro, the Atua, known to be the Atua of disease, the Atua of challenges, all the things that...
Of dark.
And for Uru, who had existed alone for a long time, that was somewhat challenging for Uru. And Uru disconnected by severing tōna pito, and went and hid in the dark folds of Ranginui, who was also experiencing grief, right?
Yes.
So there, Uru existed in the name of the cloak, and the name of the cloak was Te Kahutua Nui o Rangi.
Right.
Like the invisible cloak, like Harry Potter, that cloak, right? Invisible.
Yeah.
And there Uru existed. It's like you're in your job, and there you exist, and it's all going well, until someone like Dr. Dai comes in and says that we're actually failing our people, and you've been working hard, just doing your due, and you have to pop your head up out of the invisible korowai and say, what the hell? This is a little bit disruptive, go away, don't antagonize my comfort, my invisibility, my I'm doing okay where I am space. And I contextualize on purpose, right? It's really important to bring it into our own context. And so then Tāne being, so good at having a good critical lens on the big picture, thinks, yeah, we need to consult our oldest tuakana, the mātauranga. And it's funny because when you talked about Uru and Uru's response, it reminded me of a grumpy auntie rather than a disconnected mātauranga. What did Uru say when Tāne first approached Uru?
Oh, told Tāne to bugger off. I want nothing to do with what your guys' dilemma is.
But Tāne kept at it, right? Kept at it. Didn't take no answer.
The never give in attitude of Tāne.
And of course it worked. And what we realize is that those tears that Uru had shed had crystallized and fallen into these kete.
Which
And
makes me think that Tāne went straight to the emotion. What are these things here? Well, those were his tears. Those were the symbols of emotion.
And in today's society, we're taught that if we cry a lot, that there might be something wrong, or don't show your tears in any social context, don't show your tears in any therapeutic context, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to layer that story, break it down so people can hear it a second time, experience that initial anxiety of hearing it for some of you, and for others just to grab a little bit more and think about it, contextualize it to themselves. And now I'll just do a bit of a reading from our book about our reflections about Uru. It has several messages held within it for those of us grappling with grief, loss, and depression. And I don't mean the diagnostic depression, I just mean down and out low. This pūrākau provides hope and resolution within this journey. It was Tāne who could see the worth of the older sibling, Uru, and as Uru's tears provided light via the sun, moon, and stars. Despite Uru being the mātauranga of rangi and papa, Uru became so far removed from our consciousness. Yet Uru's journey can help us consider our own relationship with depression and how this pūrākau can shape our own culturally meaningful solutions. The approach can assist us in ways that are not always rationalized cognitively. Uru usually finds a way into our wānanga when there are difficulties overcoming the loss of a loved one. Using the pūrākau of Uru can help us think about our grief in a much broader context, an opportunity to explore, analyze, and act in ways that can free us from restrictions that prevent growth. The restrictive experiences are considered tapu, and the pūrākau about Uru aims to support the goal of whakanoa. Sometimes grief is not about losing a loved one. There are many who have simply lost their way. Consider that Uru's role is as the eldest sibling. This role came with expectations that may have amplified Uru's notion of loss, of purpose, and responsibility. Uru's role had significant cultural implications, and it appears that Uru and Ranginui were both struggling to find a way through the dark space they were in. Rangi, who remained grief-stricken from the separation, was unable to develop and shape this eldest-born child. And utilizing this story shapes a basic understanding of family systems. It can be easier to recognize things we need to change when we view our problems from another perspective, from the outside looking in. And viewing a personal situation from a higher position, like you're at the top of a tree looking down, is a trait that Tāne had. Tāne reconnects us with the beauty of how sadness and grief are important in finding our way through problems. Tāne said, "E kimi ana au I tō awhina," thus reinstating Uru's purpose by expressing their need for Uru's help. Uru was important in illuminating and warming the environment around them, and the treasures Uru would provide would ensure their father's sadness was not enduring. Tāne facilitated a shift in awareness, so the world that they knew would become filled with promise and hope. When we struggle to make sense of our problems, it hurts. This story helps us think about our problems in a different way. Rangi, papa, and their children are part of our Māori whakapapa. This hononga, this connection, is deeply important as it allows us to realize that we can become attuned to all of their characteristics while at the same time wānanga our own situation and gain perspective. Perspective is something our ancestor Tāne seemed to have an abundance of, right? We advocate for the need to gift our pūrākau to those who are disconnected from them. This is an act of aroha, a reciprocal sharing of historical knowledge will bring the pūrākau into the present. Deliberately sharing uru's story is a bold and confident way of reinstating mātauranga Māori, even when there doesn't seem to be any apparent connection to the immediate problem. These can at times be the most powerful wānanga. More importantly, when Mahi Atua is used and pūrākau are shared, the response from those in wānanga is meaningful and powerful in creating shifts to provide space for movement and healing. We had a discussion last night as we were preparing for this, and Mark and I were talking about how us as Ngai Māori really value our pūrākau and our whakapapa, and those that come to our wānanga really value the pūrākau. But one of the biggest problems is that when you leave the wānanga, that rather than seeing every opportunity in your spaces to share the pūrākau, we're actually seeing every opportunity why we can't share the pūrākau. So have a think about those ngangara, because that's whiro coming in, right? And whiro really injected fear and a sense of disconnection in uru, and that creates more grief. So thinking about us with the problem of being disconnected and not liking to show our tears, not liking to show our vulnerability, I ask you to think about a time when you don't know all of a story, but you're happy to share it. Like gossiping. We're happy to gossip. We share part stories, right? It has a huge impact on others. When we're sharing the story of uru, one of the ngangara for you could actually be, I don't know all the names yet. So what I ask you to think about, and what we talked about, right, Mark? So you can give a little bit of a kōrero about what we talked about last night, ways that you can engage in sharing the pūrākau and challenging your ngangara at the same time. Ka pai? Unmute yourself and help.
Yeah, no, you can, if you follow the second principle of Mahi Atua, which is to be an active learner, then what you could possibly do is to go on a journey, say like with your kids, for example, you say, look, I just learned this story. So it comes down to the scripting. That way the children know that you've only just learned the story. And then you can say, and I'm not quite up to the play, or I haven't quite nailed a lot of the names, but maybe we could work on this together. And so you're putting yourself into the learner bracket and open to learning alongside your children. So that can be an example of enjoying and sharing the story, learning the story, and forever growing in being able to know the names, the theme of the story, pulling that apart with your children perhaps, or to anybody that you're sharing it. So it's the idea there is so that the false desire to be perfect in storytelling doesn't hold you up. So you allow yourself to be the learner and put yourself into that situation using scripts. Yeah, just that was some of the kōrero that we had last night about how to improve the sharing. And that will eventually, of course, drive that you improve each time your knowledge of the story.
Yeah, we talk a lot about meritocracy and the idea of attaining knowledge to be able to do better in life if you work hard on it. But actually, that's not working in our current society. And I implore you to think about learning as those every opportunity, and learning in the spaces where you're relating with anyone and everyone, and being able to use that as an opportunity of learning with each other, rather than thinking that we have to have this certificate to be able to wānanga and reconnect and bring back our oranga whakapapa. So I've got a story here, and you and I were meant to share it, but I'm not sure if you can see it without losing your face. So I may as well just read it, right? I'm sure you kapai. So whānau, just to let you know, in our wānanga, in our rangiporori wānanga, in our intensive part of that, we open up the space for someone to come in with their whānau to talk about a problem, so that we can allow everyone around us to see what a therapeutic wānanga Mahi Atua style looks like. And as I said earlier, we really wanted you to think about the questions about which atua you resonate with and what this pūrākau did for you. And this is what it did when we used it in a therapeutic wānanga. So the story is me and uru in a therapeutic wānanga. Kia ora. My name is Rose. I was privileged as a mātauranga to sit in a therapeutic wānanga with Rangiporori Manaia 2021. In my experience as a mātauranga, I felt vulnerable in sharing my grief that had crippled me for so long in the presence of many tauira training to become what I am, a mātauranga. Although vulnerable, I wanted to show everyone how powerful the use of pūrākau is in our healing. The grief of losing a pepe in utero was a difficult time during the COVID lockdown period. The isolation was consuming. My thoughts were scattered and the sadness was deep and dark. This was a roller coaster of emotions that stayed with me. However, I wanted them severed from my life forever. In the therapeutic wānanga, I was supported by my Te Kurahuna whānau, whom I shared my loss with. This wānanga was facilitated by Dr. Kōpua. The Māori artist was Papa Mark Kōpua. The introduction to the wānanga had a caring and empathic feel to it. However, the emotion of sadness started to flow. All whānau support were tearful, including the facilitator. Suddenly, the audience became a vague memory in the background and were forgotten. Dr. Dai checked in often with me to see how I was doing, so I felt held to carry on further, delving deeper into my distress. The pūrākau uru te ngangana was used as the approach. As Papa Mark shared and drew on the paper, there was an automatic connection to this pūrākau. I could relate myself to te pōnui, a great darkness, te pōroa, feeling like I'd been in the dark space for a long time and not knowing how to get out, which I connected to te pōkerekere. Papa spoke of te pōuriuri and how during this era, whiro came to be. I reflected that during my times of grieving, maybe I was like whiro, which made me wonder, did I even want to leave this intense darkness? At times, I would remove myself from everyone around me. Then other times, I felt like I was making traction as I moved through te pō whawha and te pō namu. Being in the therapeutic wānanga, I came to this realization and understanding of my distress, that it was okay to cry, to feel, to be whiro, to be uru in those times of te pō. Me, Rose's whānau, uru and Rose in a therapeutic wānanga. I'd known about Rose's grief around the loss of her pepe in utero. As a team at Mahi, we had journeyed some of that with her as she breathed in and out through the excitement and hope that she would conceive, and then again through the grief and loss of all that potential. When Rose was asked to participate in the therapeutic wānanga, I remember thinking, this is perfect. This is great for Rose, for sure, 100%. I was up for supporting her through this process. And when it was our turn in the wānanga to present back, the four of us from Mahi, Rose and her kāhui of wahine went up together. Rose sat on the chair. We flanked her at her feet. I remember thinking about postures of servitude and that I was happy to be of service to my poor, grieving mate. We were all asked to rate how we were doing at the time in the space. My scores were high and consistent, reflecting my version of well-being. Dr. Dai's voice was soft, her words deliberate. Papa Mark was toe, listening intently at the start and then telling the story of Uru and Uru's grief in melodic, gentle tones, deep, husky ones too. Ah, yes, yes, I thought. Rose, this is great, e hoa. This is what you need. What a wonderful miracle of intervention for you. This story couldn't be any more perfect. Ha ha. So this was me, feeling deeply for my mate, yet excited that this was the rongoā she needed. And then, boof, it hit me. I was Rose. I was Uru. I had also lost a pepe at 16 weeks in utero. It was years ago, and I was sure I'd dealt with it. Miri miri, romi romi, karakia, tangi, wānanga. But here I was contemplating Rose as Uru, Rose and her loss, and I was confronted by my own. I hadn't considered that this was also my story to own, to investigate until now. And of course it was. I had been invited to participate. I had been asked how I was at the beginning of the wānanga. I cried with Rose beside her, not separate or in service to, but with her, as Uru. It was a powerful realization, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to find myself under te kahu tuanui a rangi with Uru, with Rose, with so many mama who have shed the same tears. I think it's the first time I'd visited my own grief as part of a kahui and not just an individual woman who had suffered, who would get over it in time. This was the Hinātore for me. This was the stars, the sun, the moon that is born from loss. That's us, whānau. I just a couple more questions or things that we would encourage from you. You've heard this story. Draw, write a poem, a short story, compose a song, paint, cook a meal, build something, carve, haka, sculpt, write, perform a whakaari, a skit that shows a part of or all of this pūrākau. In essence, retell the pūrākau in a creative medium that resonates with you. Don't be afraid to try a new medium. Be brave, be courageous. This is your story of what the pūrākau of Uru and the power of grief and healing means to you. This is where the past of this pūrākau and the past of you come together in the present in order to assist the future. Hine kaorohia.
I was just thinking that in my career as a kāvo, as an artist, this is food for us, this type of kōrero. And for example, if I was asked to produce something based on Uru Te Ngangana, which I have, there's a lot of time that is spent with Uru Te Ngangana when you're producing a piece of art or producing anything around the kōrero of Uru Te Ngangana. So that by the time that task is complete, I had become quite familiar with Uru Te Ngangana and had gone through this whole, 2 or 3 months of analysing the behaviour, analysing the kōrero, doing reflections about Uru and the behaviour and the circumstances and so forth. So it's I fully recommend producing something, a piece of art, a cake, anything that helps you to absorb, to focus in on the story of Uru.
This is mine. This is Uru biting into my skin and tāne always aspiring onward and upward. And but they meet, and this reflects the moon and the stars and the sun. And it really was an important time for me, because it was at med school when I felt dumb. I thought I was dumb. All the uru space was heavy for me, but there was something in me that was so tāne driven that I just needed to acknowledge how important they both were, not one or the other, but how they were both important. So we've finished, and I see that there are some questions, and I'm happy to just go through it. The naming of the kete. So Mr. Kōpua, name all of the kete and what came from what kete. So there was kete raururangi.
Yeah, the bulk of the raururangi was one of the baskets, and raururangi, the basket, became one of the galaxies. But from out of raururangi came Hina Marama and Tamanui Te Rā. And the other basket that Tāne was given was called Tongotongo. And the name Tongotongo is supposed to describe the empty spaces as well, in the weave of the basket. And from out of there came all the asteroids and meteorites and all the different stars. And of course, Tongotongo also became part of the galaxy. And it, again, like the translation for the holes in the basket, Tongotongo is also, as Rangi Mātauranga would say, would be the names for all the dark spaces up in the sky. The other two baskets, Te Rau Aroha and Te Kauhanga, remain with Uru. But of course, those were different stars as well that were possibly parts of other galaxies and so forth. And there were quite a few of the different galaxies, like Te Kurahuna and Maunganui. Those are some of them. So those were the names. Te Rau Aroha, Te Kauhanga, Tongotongo, and Raururangi.
Ka pai. And there is a question from Anne Louise, but you know, this is how we work, Anne Louise. We prioritize. If we're trying to address inequity, we have to prioritize how to resource Māori. So this is an example of how I do it with no ill effect at all, but more about prioritizing resources. And so I'm just going to save your question for last if we have time, and go from which basket did the Hinātore come from. And so Kiritopa, the Hinātore actually came from the armpit of Papatuanuku. Mr. Kōpua, kōrero mai.
Oh, the Hinātore was not in the baskets, but from the Hinātore, there was a period of time called Te Pō Namu Namu, and then Hinātore came about, and during Te Pō Namu Namu, it went to Te Ao Namu Namu, and eventually carried over into Te Ao Marama, or Te Whaiao first, and then to Te Ao Marama. But it wasn't, the Hinātore wasn't part of the baskets. Hinātore is actually the shape. It's a decoration that's used in carving and in moko, and it is shaped much like a vagina that has a chevron pattern running through the middle and radiating, you know, like the labia majora, labia minor, or whatever. And
No, not whatever, both. They're very valuable.
Value.
Say them clearly.
Minora?
Minora. Like
Minora.
Yeah, that's it.
My goodness. So
You look distracted.
That's where the Hinātore came from. It was a tiny speckle of light. And of course, the other part of their kōrero is that the Hinātore is the phosphorus glow of the glowworm, which is why it was crafty for Tāne to say you need to flood, in order to put that light out, you need to flood it in daylight. As we know, you can't see glowworms during the day. And that's been a kōrero that's come out of the situation with Uru. In order for Tāne to find the light, Tāne had to go into the dark, because that's where Uru was. And so you can't find, you're in the light if you're trying to look for light in the light. So you have to go into the dark. That's the only space. And there's a connection there with te ira wahine and te ira atua, ira tāne. There's strong connections there with that kōrero. Ona, kia ora.
Oh, ka pai, Jean. I love it. You've set the context. You know who your audience is, 7-year-old. It's your 7-year-old. And so although you're asking us to share an idea of what you can do with them, I'm going to put it straight back to you because you're the expert of your baby. And also as an active learner, as a mama active learner in their space, his or her space, you trial something and then you check in with whether it worked or not. Ka pai? Well, I don't know if it's pai, but that's what I'm going with. And someone asked, Renee asked, how do we see the kōrero and share pūrākau? How do we see it being looked after, but also move into this new world where our mātauranga and whakapapa? No, you can't check your text messages while you're a keynote, Mr. Kōpua. You must ignore them.
I'm reading that kōrero, the pātais.
No, you can't. No, don't do that because we lose you. So how do we look after this knowledge and the whakapapa?
Oh, I tell you what, I actually thought that this was something I was going to take with me into the pō, my own pō. But because of wānanga, it has come alive. It grows. There's an enthusiasm. It's a reconnection of our own people to their stories. And so if you want to keep it alive, you have to actively tell the stories.
So that reminds me, because I hadn't quite finished, Renee had talked, especially if it's been sought after by not just Māori, right? And I always think of your moko story about reinstating facial moko into New Zealand society, Mark, after the demise of moko and then the reinstatement. And actually when you went to get knowledge from the last living person who had knowledge of that traditional way.
Hey, yeah.
Right? And they said, keep it in the pō.
Yeah. He said to me, oh, no te pō tauera, waihoi te pō. So and maybe... I thought to myself, well, I'm not here for permission. I'm already going to go down this track. So I said to him, look, it's alive. It's not in the pō anymore. And we could either stumble our way through it and get things wrong and learn that way, or you could help us and share the kōrero and guide us through it.
And you have Pākehā that are really keen on getting Māori tattoos on their skin, but you have an opinion about them having facial moko, right? And I just wonder about whether that can be like an analogy or a blueprint for the way we think about our mātauranga in our society. And lots of different artists. Is a Māori artist, because you're a Māori artist, is the art Māori art, right? There's in lots of different spaces.
Yes. Yeah, no, we had years ago, we had an interesting debate about that. And one of the opinions was that you had to be a Māori artist before it was actually Māori art. And but that was stuffed up because there were Māori recipients who got Māori work, moko, done on their face by a Pākehā artist. So it's not just about who the artist is or what the artist is, it's also about the recipient, because the response to that is there's no way anybody was going to tell those Māori people that what they wear wasn't moko. What they wore, they're all passed on now.
Yeah, and as much as I'm trying to save one of those questions for later, I can see that everyone has themes around it, and we are in systems that hugely advantage us based on the color of our skin. So for us who are white, we are privileged in more ways than we can imagine, like an extended life, quality of life, certainty that your baby will probably live and not have any in utero problems. We know that. There are reports and reviews that highlight that. Te Pūrākau Te Atatu talked about that in the 80s. It was ignored. We have an opportunity now where all of the stars are aligned and resources seem to be coming our way. But in the words of Linda Tuhiwai-Smith in a recent presentation down in the Hawke's Bay, where Māori do well, the government will take it, give it a breathing space for about 5 years, and then find a competitor to knock you over. It happened with our tārangi, the kohanga movement, kura Māori, and so we have to be careful of that. We have to be careful of that. So for all of you non-Māori in these spaces that want to use pūrākau, you have to appreciate that gaining the knowledge privileges you in a space where we're still trying to shed our skin and make sense of all of the shit that's happening to us or has happened to us. We're still realizing our history. And if anything, our non-Māori treaty partners could at least create space for us to exist in. That's your role, from my perspective, is for you to be a space holder for us to thrive, right? So if you are working with a whānau and you share a pūrākau, you're working with a whānau Māori and you share a pūrākau, your scripts are bloody important. You could make them feel whakaiti, not intentionally, but why not create a space where you bring someone who's practicing to share the pūrākau? Why does it have to be you? Why can you not find your Māori leaders in your community and put more emphasis on that? Yes, share your pūrākau with whoever you want to, but if you're the one doing it, even though it doesn't really appear like you have a negative impact, it's not your intention, there are some other things that you can do. Share the story to your own whānau to think about the anti-colonial position that we need to have. The pūrākau are for blueprints for you to reconceptualize your position in New Zealand society as a treaty partner. We must expose the injustices so that we can clear a path for re-indigenation, indigeneity, for Ngai Māori to thrive. That does not mean that you as a Pākehā needs to know all of this knowledge, because that, again, is a banking knowledge system that doesn't work for anyone, including yourself. But you can use the pūrākau for yourself to shift your own thinking, to shift your own implicit bias. Hope that that was helpful. A bit forceful, but I know it matters, right? We have to... there's a story in the Tāne Te Wānanga where Rongo, we talk about Rongo, the Atua of Peace, but, you know, Rongo had a history before Rongo shape-shifted into Rongo Atua of Peace, Atua of Healing, Atua of Listening. Rongo was bloody jealous, and Rongo also was quite strong and fought well and drew a line in the sand and was able to cast whiro toward Rarohenga. I digress. Anything else? Hawati, I see you've come in. Is that because you're sort of controlling our time, which is a good thing? There are so many questions. I don't know where to go.
Heaps of questions, fine. Te reka hoki o ngā kōrero ora kaukau he ana kia mutu. Kōrero. I did see one from Mere Mere I konei, and a bit biased. Koia hoki taku tino atua, especially when it comes to the new moon every month. Try and fast on whiro, but ko tana aronga, ko whiro te atua e whai whakaro nui te ana e ia. Kona pāta e nā te aha I whakaro pērā ai ia ki te whakararu, ki te whakahāwea, ki te mahi kino. Ko wai o nā kaitiaki, ko wai I whakatupu, I poi I aia, he hanga pūrākau mō whiro ake, in this context, I suppose. I whānau mai ia ki te pōkātahi ka pērā ai ia mihi nui kia kōrua mō ngā pakirehua nei. Yeah, just any other kōrero around whiro in this context, perhaps.
Mahau e te tuatahi, Mark.
Well, kia aua nei, ko te atua tonu nei a whiro, he momo o te tangata. Hoi no, e rā momo ka kite hoki I roto I te whawhai a tāwhiri mātea ki a tangaro I te whawhai a tāwhiri mātea ki tāne mā, ki rongo mā, ki rātau mā. Ko te momo tērā, ko te āhuatanga tonu tērā o te tangata. E hala I te mea kai te kimi hare I ngā whakautu mō e rā o ngā momo pātai a te tangata. Kararu tātai. Pēnā tunu I etai tangata ka kimi atu mō ngā atua wahine. Nā kia aua ni, ka kite tonu au I te tahi pōhatu I te tātai nei, ka reo e maharahara me he pōhatu wahine he pōhatu tāne rāna. Nā te mea kei te titiro atu au ki te taiao. O nā āhuatanga, te papaki mai o ngā ngaru, e rā tū momo āhuatanga katoa. That's the way that I see things is that whiro is a part of nature. It is part of our nature to be that way. The way that is a whiro way. And, miharo tonu au I a whiro. Because with the whiro, you get drive. You take the challenges on. In fact, you push like you've already won the challenge. And so, koera te momo o roto I te tangata, ko te momo o whiro. Hei te pai? I'm not too sure whether that answered the question, but...
E whakaro anō tāku. So, when we wānanga whiro, remember in the beginning about the story of Uru, I encourage you to not think in a negative or discriminatory way, just a neutral way. And the best way to do that is describe the behavior, don't interpret the behavior. So, the idea of whiro, the first makutu was in the story, Noho Tatapu, and as Uepoto and the three amigos went toward the Hinātore, whiro cursed them. There was a couple of warnings, but then whiro cursed them, the first makutu story. And rather than saying, man, what a bully, maybe just say whiro cursed them, right? And I wonder why whiro did that. And what that's led us to talk about is whiro as the sacred protector of the realm, or protector of the sacred realm.
Of the sacred realm.
Right? And so we all need protectors of the sacred realm. Our rangatahi, when they sneak out the window and go and smoke dope and drink and get with someone they weren't meant to get with, and you see condoms in their drawers, all those sort of mahi, we as mums become like whiro. It's
Yes.
an important role. It's an important role, although it's almost disconnects them. And the child can be like uru and sever and disappear. And we don't want that, right? That's why our pūrākau are blueprints for thinking, if I am too protective, then I'll lose uru. So this is, I don't think that we have an answer about what's right or wrong, but what I would suggest is that we contextualize it and wānanga with people. Like, I don't think that Mark and I are an authority of the right answer, but I really implore you to describe the behavior, right? Describe the behavior and leave it there, rather than say, man, you're a gossip, man, you're a bully, gee, she's awful, gee, she's an arsehole. Describe the behavior, because if you describe the behavior, we can have a wānanga about it. If you jump to the interpretation, you become too rigid. And that leads me into another question where people wanted us to talk a little bit more about the critical lens. I'll tell you a really good resource is Te Ngata just put out some COVID cards in Māori and Pākehā, and it's about misinformation. And I think the first question in Māori is, I ahu mai te mātauranga I hia? Like, where did that come from? And real good questions to help you think critically about any source of knowledge, including mine and Mark's. Often we try not to say the answer. We try to just keep it open so we can be in wānanga. And we appreciate that there are many different versions of pūrākau, of whakapapa, and we think we should celebrate them. We think that our minds are liberal enough and can expand enough to have 50,000 truths, as long as you pity to yours. Right? The idea of leaning into the discomfort, our third principle, hongi hongi te whaiwhaia, when things are uncomfortable, we usually shut shop. We usually put up our guards, put up our defenses, and those people that say they don't, there will be times that you do. And if you generalize about the fact that you don't, it might be another way of being too rigid in your idea that you're not rigid. So start exploring with people you know. Am I ever rigid about something? And they'll give you feedback about that. And so that's a little bit about the critical lens. I can't find the question, but from what I recall of it, that was us talking a little bit about, critical feedback. The only other thing, when we're developing Mahi Atua systems like in Te Kurahuna, for those that work in health spaces, there are things called multi-disciplinary teams, and we have multi-disciplinary team meetings. They're meant to be meetings where people of different disciplines sit around and share and weave in knowledge together to help a problem solve. But that's not how it evolves. What happens is that there's bickering and people don't want to be told how to improve if a whānau isn't doing well. We don't want to be given any ideas because we think we're doing the best we can and don't want to be told that we're slacking in any way. And the MDTs are a perfect example of the core of the beast in institutional racism and health systems from my perspective. And what we're creating is what we call huaki pauri. And huaki pauri is a conceptual house where tāne existed when it had been decided that the parents should be separated. Whiro existed in tūtea niwa, and tūtea niwa was a fixed mindset set whare. And so what we have created is a huaki pauri. And huaki pauri, when whānau are not doing well and we're working with whānau, we go in, we're not talking about the whānau and what the whānau need to do differently. We're talking about ourselves. And so we have to trust the space. So my answer to you is critical feedback involves a collective. We have to work together and trust each other. And that's a process. And so when we have that process and there's not a trusting, we have to wānanga it. We might use a pūrākau, we might not. But we tend to take sides. But to wānanga, to embed a way of being that thrives on a strong relationship. Regardless of what we've gone into the meeting for, which is what we do in our Western meetings, we're agenda driven. In Mahi Atua, we're process driven. We're about relationships. And if one's not getting on, we have to resource it as much as possible to try and get a good outcome. And so it usually happens, these relational problems, because we haven't set up relationships where we feel comfortable in giving each other feedback to grow our collective potential. And that's where our relational fracture happens. Mum can't give teenager feedback. Teenagers shut shop to it. Teenagers said, you're one to talk. You do it too. You've done it too. But the mums and dads don't really want to talk about it. And so wānanga is about maybe you should talk about it. Maybe you need to show the other momo, your other momo to your child so they can see that they're normal. So critical feedback is crucial. It's the hardest principle that we work with. But what we've seen after a year and a half of working with Te Kurahuna is that their MDT gone into huaki pauri is that they hardly ever talk about their patients, their whānau in distress without them, and they're always reflecting on their own behaviours and what could be improved. And I'll tell you what gets us there in a gentle, kind, loving way is the arts, poetry, waiata, inside these clinical spaces. That's what we do in our, what was traditionally MDT. In our huaki pauri, we are showing our art, we are singing, doing poetry, and really moving toward an art space. If you engage in Mahi Atua, you become a mātauranga. And a mātauranga is a change agent. Mātauranga was an arrogant prick, like no one could tell mātauranga what to do. So when mātauranga went to Rarohenga, mātauranga took all of his momo, all of his weke there as well, and soon learnt. Well, it wasn't a quick learning, wasn't a quick lesson, but realized after a long journey that it was the arts that he and Niwareka needed to bring back to Te Ao Tūroa to find balance and peace. And I think we'll leave it there if that's pai, because we're 11:30.
Oh, e reka ngā kōrero e te whaia, e te matua. Just amazing. And I think one of the main themes that keeps reoccurring as I hear in your kōrero is that, that pakirehua, that learning, that wānanga space, inquiry learning, going with people as opposed to a top-down approach. And ko tō tātou tai aotera, ko au ko taku maunga tapu, ko taku awa tapu, ko taku whenua tapu, ko au ko koe, ko koe, ko au ko tātou tēnei, ko a tātou atua e awhiowhio haere ana nei. Ka kapo ake i ngā mihi o te hunga mā takitaki kia kōrua, tēnā kōrua katoa ki te whakaara ke i ngā kanohi o a tātou atua i roto a tātou pūrākau. Ko te aroha pūmau tēnei e toko ake ana e rere kau nei kia kōrua, tēnā kōrua, tēnā kōrua, tēnā kōrua.
Yep.
Ai, mihi kau ake ana.
Tēnā koutou. Ka wawe.
I tēnei wā e te whānau ka tahuri tātou ki te paku para manawa. But, that was Te Ao Māori in action getting Matua, Mark and Whaia Dai in on with us, that was just the flow, Te Ao Māori in flow. Ko ngā kuku pātera i tohu mai ana i te pai, i te tohu pai.